At precisely 2:35 a.m. Kiev time, a silent event unfolded. One that would send ripples from Beijing to Moscow. A covert weapons deal, valued at $1.8 billion and secretly arranged by China to support Russia's war efforts, suddenly collapsed. It wasn't diplomacy or sanctions that caused this collapse. It was something far quieter and far more devastating. Instead, it was a precise and invisible action executed by Ukraine's cyber warfare units. Under the codename Specter Shield, Ukraine's cyber forces executed one of the most sophisticated digital ambushes in modern warfare. This was not a conventional attack involving explosions or missile strikes. Within minutes, China's internal defense trade systems went dark, encrypted communication lines failed, and crucial logistics data for weapons shipments were erased. The deal's collapse was more than a financial loss. It signified the disruption of a geopolitical strategy that had been developed over several years. To grasp the full significance of this event, it is necessary to understand how this secret agreement was formed. For months, European intelligence agencies had been monitoring unusual activities between Chinese state-owned defense companies and Russian intermediaries. While Beijing's public stance remained neutral, its shadow operations told a different story. China had been discreetly supplying essential military components, including targeting systems, drone technologies, and metals for ammunition through a network of proxy nations and private contractors. The $1.8 billion deal was the most ambitious part of this covert supply chain. Codenamed Project Meridian, the operation was reportedly managed through shell companies in Central Asia and the Middle East. Its objective was to deliver advanced reconnaissance drones, anti-aircraft systems, and encrypted communications hardware to Russian forces under pressure on the Eastern Front. Moscow was in a difficult position, with its logistical reserves diminishing after significant losses of drones and artillery in Donetsk and Luhansk. For Beijing, it was profit disguised as strategy, a chance to tilt the balance of power while avoiding open confrontation. However, Ukraine's intelligence services were monitoring these developments. The Security Service of Ukraine, in collaboration with Western partners, was tracing digital evidence across shipping manifests, electronic financial transfers, and even small irregularities in China's encrypted military communications. By early October, Ukrainian analysts had identified a significant increase in satellite bandwidth usage along specific Chinese maritime routes, particularly near the ports of Dalian and Tianjin. The pattern was similar to previous covert arms transfers, but this time the communications were secured with next-generation quantum-resistant encryption, which was thought to be unbreakable. This was the first major indicator that a significant operation was underway. In the weeks that followed, Ukraine's cyber division, informally known as Ghost Step, started probing for vulnerabilities in Chinese commercial logistics software, which coordinated shipments between mainland suppliers and offshore contractors, had been quietly integrated with military-grade security modules. Through layers of false packets and decoy transmissions, Ukrainian operatives ghosted into the system, undetected, unseen. By the time Beijing finalized the transfer documents, which were routed electronically through servers in Singapore and confirmed by Russian defense agents, the cyber ambush was ready. At 2:35 a.m., the operation was initiated. Almost instantly, automated shipment confirmations were corrupted, payment verification codes were rewritten, and encrypted trade logs were deleted. Chinese defense officials who were monitoring the transaction saw their screens fill with error messages as entire network clusters shut down. This was not simple sabotage. It was a targeted disruption that effectively nullified months of covert planning. The result was immediate. Moscow's advance payment, estimated to be around $800 million in gold-backed digital credits, was lost in the ensuing chaos. Unable to authenticate the deal, Beijing froze all related transactions, causing the entire $1.8 billion pipeline to collapse. Western intelligence sources described the event as a cyber strike of surgical precision. There was no data leak and no traceable malware, just a perfectly timed disruption that made every encrypted contract invalid. It was as if Ukraine had triggered a targeted digital pulse that disabled China's operational war chest. The true brilliance of Specter Shield lay not in what it destroyed, but in what it denied. Unlike previous cyber attacks that targeted infrastructure or propaganda, Specter Shield was designed for precision denial. It did not target the information itself, but rather the trust in the system's ability to verify that information. Once Beijing's systems could no longer confirm authenticity, every operation that relied on that trust failed. In Moscow, the news caused alarm throughout the defense procurement network. Russian officials tried to re-establish contact with their Chinese counterparts, but found that entire communication channels were offline. With logistical problems already affecting Russian operations in Kharkiv and Zaporizhia, this digital failure occurred at a critical moment. The timing was intentional. It happened just days after Ukrainian drone units had destroyed several key ammunition depots near Mariupol and targeted a convoy believed to be carrying North Korean artillery shells. By attacking digitally, Ukraine showed that it could challenge its adversaries not just on the battlefield, but also within the networks that support their military efforts. Experts are already describing this as a significant moment in modern hybrid warfare. For years, there has been a debate about whether cyber attacks could have the same strategic effect as physical military strikes. Ukraine's operation provided a clear answer. As the situation became clearer, financial watchdogs in Hong Kong noted unusual activity in offshore accounts connected to Chinese defense companies. Western intelligence confirmed the suspension of at least 6 joint projects between Chinese and Russian contractors. Pro-Russian social media networks began to spread disinformation, attributing the incident to technical issues. However, the timing and precision of the failure made it clear that this was a calculated Ukrainian operation. The failure of Project Meridian is more than just a financial loss for Russia and China. It signals a potential fracture in an alliance based on covert cooperation. For Beijing, it is a warning that even its most secure systems are vulnerable to skilled and strategic cyber defense. For Moscow, it is another indication that its network of allies cannot reliably provide the weapons it needs to continue the war. As the world processes the implications of this cyber ambush, the main questions are how China and Russia will respond, and what this means for the future of their military collaboration. As the sun rose over Beijing, the initial signs of disruption emerged. At 8 a.m., the encrypted command network connecting the Chinese Ministry of State Security with state-owned defense conglomerates like Norinco was put into an emergency lockdown. Entire project databases were taken offline. Technicians worked to diagnose the problem, but the situation appeared increasingly severe. Ukraine's cyber ambush had erased or corrupted months of transactional data across 3 continents in under 12 minutes. It was a sophisticated attack that inserted false authentication protocols, mimicking legitimate encryption certificates. When Chinese servers tried to validate the weapons contract, the network's own security features turned against the operation, flagging every transaction as fraudulent. In Beijing, high-ranking officials from the Ministry of Commerce and the Central Military Commission held emergency meetings. Digital forensic reports indicated that critical shipment codes were corrupted and international payment channels were disabled. The entire digital trail of Project Meridian had been wiped so cleanly that even China's advanced AI recovery systems could not reconstruct the data. The Kremlin's Defense Procurement Bureau received only digital silence. By noon, Moscow time, Russia suspended all Chinese-linked transactions, fearing the disruption could spread to its own domestic systems. Inside Russia's Ministry of Defense, frustration grew, with Russian intelligence reportedly blaming China for incompetence, while Chinese officials privately cited Moscow's security carelessness. The meticulous planning behind the Ukrainian operation was remarkable. European intelligence sources revealed that the cyber ambush was the result of months of preparation. Ukrainian analysts had built a digital model of China's defense trade network using intercepted data and information from compromised contractors. The key vulnerability they discovered was a redundant verification sequence in China's export management system that trusted locally generated keys more than global ones. Ukraine exploited this by planting a phantom update disguised as an internal software patch, which triggered the system's collapse during a scheduled verification. The operation was executed with unprecedented control, causing no collateral damage to civilian infrastructure. This level of precision was achieved while Ukraine's military was engaged in active combat on multiple fronts, from drone strikes in the south to artillery engagements near Avdiivka. In Kyiv, there was a sense of quiet accomplishment. Officials refrained from public comment, but experts close to the operation suggested it was a warning shot. The message was clear. Ukraine could penetrate the core of China's defense infrastructure, but had chosen restraint over widespread destruction. This event exposed an important reality for China, that despite its significant investments in cybersecurity, its systems are still vulnerable to agile and strategic adversaries. For Russia, it highlighted the instability of its alliances. The geopolitical consequences were immediate. The US and European officials viewed the event as a validation of their support for Ukraine's cyber defense capabilities. In China, censors worked to suppress online discussions of foreign interference, with the official explanation being a routine digital malfunction. However, whispers of the breach spread within the country's tech community. The Chinese leadership faced a difficult choice: either retaliate publicly and expose their covert support for Russia, or remain silent and accept the strategic setback. For the time being, they chose silence. In Moscow, the news was a major blow to the military establishment. Without the advanced Chinese hardware, particularly drone guidance systems and encrypted communication terminals, Russia's army faced another significant delay in its modernization efforts. Ukrainian officials, speaking anonymously, said the deal's collapse had bought them months of operational breathing room, allowing them to strengthen their defensive lines. This operation was part of a larger campaign targeting the financial networks supporting Russia's war. Previously, Ukraine had intercepted oil revenues and disrupted supply chains from Iran and North Korea. The collapse of the Chinese deal was the most significant strike to date. The battlefield is no longer just physical territory. It now includes code, algorithms, and data protocols. This event has been called the Digital Tsushima, a reference to the 1905 naval battle where Japan's victory over Russia shifted global power dynamics. Similarly, this cyber ambush marks a new phase in modern digital warfare. However, analysts warn that both China and Russia are likely to retaliate through more subtle operations aimed at destabilizing Ukraine's systems or influencing global narratives. In response, Ukraine is already strengthening its digital defenses, working with NATO's Cyber Defense Center and private firms to build a layered defense architecture known as Fortress Cloud. Ukraine is not just defending itself, it is creating a model for how smaller nations can counter larger adversaries in the information age. What began as a secret $1.8 billion weapons deal ended as a demonstration of overreach and vulnerability. In a single, calculated digital strike, Ukraine did not just disrupt a deal, it reshaped the perception of power in modern conflict. And that brings us to the end of today's report. Last night's cyber ambush was a pivotal moment. Ukraine's silent strike against the secret $1.8 billion weapons deal with China and Russia proves that modern wars are fought not just on the front lines, but also within the digital networks that support them. As Beijing and Moscow grapple with the fallout, it's clear Ukraine's resilience is built on innovation and intelligence. If this analysis was insightful, please like, share, and subscribe to support our in-depth coverage. Stay tuned as we next explore Russia's weakening alliances and Ukraine's latest counter-offensives. Until then, stay informed.